Evelyn's inspection of the abandoned Blackwood Foundry turns terrifying as ghostly, burnt workers surround her. Their whispers grow louder, and the shadows close in, their cold hands reaching for her as the darkness deepens. Evelyn worked for the city's redevelopment agency, a quiet job that rarely sent her to dangerous places until the old Blackwood Foundry. Abandoned for decades after a tragic collapse killed over 100 workers, the foundry sat like a scar on the edge of town. Stories swirled about what had happened there, but Evelyn dismissed them as nothing more than urban legends. When her boss asked her to inspect the site for redevelopment, Evelyn was reluctant but went anyway. The sun was already setting when she arrived, and a thick fog rolled in from the nearby river, blanketing the area in a cold, clammy mist. The building loomed ahead, crumbling and broken, but still standing. The foundry's towering smokestacks pierced the evening sky like skeletal fingers, and Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Her footsteps echoed eerily as she crossed the cracked courtyard, every sound swallowed by the mist. The front door groaned as it opened, the old hinges protesting her intrusion. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of rust and something faintly foul, like old rot. Her flashlight cut through the darkness in weak beams, casting long shadows across the floor where heaps of twisted metal and broken machinery lay abandoned. As she ventured deeper into the foundry, Evelyn heard something, a faint scraping, like metal being dragged across concrete. She stopped, her heart quickening. The noise came again, closer now. She swallowed hard, telling herself it was just the building settling or a piece of debris shifting. Still, her hand trembled as she held the flashlight, its beam flickering slightly. She pushed on, her goal a storage room at the back of the building. The city's record said it was sealed off, but she had to check. When she reached the room, the door was ajar, though rusted and heavy. Something felt wrong, terribly wrong. The scraping sound returned, louder now, accompanied by a faint whisper that sent a shiver down her spine. Her breath caught in her throat as the flashlight beam flickered and then died, plunging her into darkness. She cursed, fumbling with it, when suddenly the door behind her slammed shut. Her heart pounded in her ears as she banged on the door, but it wouldn't budge. She was trapped. In the suffocating silence that followed, a new sound emerged, breathing. Slow, labored breaths, rasping and wet. It came from behind her. Evelyn spun around, her flashlight sputtering to life just long enough to reveal a figure standing in the far corner of the room. It was a man, or something that had once been a man, his face twisted in agony, his eyes wide and unblinking. His mouth hung open in a silent scream, and his skin was scorched, blackened by fire. Then, as she watched in horror, he moved. His body jerked unnaturally, limbs contorting as though pulled by unseen strings. He staggered toward her, his burnt face locked in that frozen scream. The sound of chains rattled behind him, dragging across the floor, and in the dim light, Evelyn saw them. Dozens of shadowy figures, burnt and broken, all staring at her with hollow eyes. They were the workers, the ones who had died when the foundry collapsed. The air around her grew thick, heavy with their suffering, and the whispers became louder, filling her ears with desperate pleas for release. But she couldn't move. The terror had frozen her in place. The figures surrounded her now, their cold, dead hands reaching out. The man at the front, the foreman, she realized, grinned, his charred lips cracking as he whispered, "Join us." The last thing Evelyn felt was their hands pulling her down, dragging her into the darkness. The next morning, the redevelopment team arrived at the site, ready to begin demolition. But no one ever found Evelyn, or any trace of her for that matter. The foundry remained untouched, and the workers who ventured close swore they could still hear her screams echoing from deep inside. She disappeared 60 years ago, and she's still waiting to be found. When I was 12, my parents enrolled me in a small old school on the outskirts of town. St. Mary's had a reputation, mostly for its academic excellence, but there was something about the building that made me uneasy. The school had been there for decades, maybe even longer, and you could feel its age in the creaky floors and the smell of mildew that lingered in the hallways. Still, it seemed normal enough, at least at first. During my first week there, a girl in my class, Emily, told me something strange. "You know this school used to be a hospital, right?" she whispered one afternoon during lunch. I wasn't sure whether to believe her. During the outbreak years ago, they used the classrooms to treat sick patients, and a lot of them didn't make it. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Some people say the patients never left." I shrugged it off. It sounded like just another scary story kids tell to freak each other out. But the more time I spent at St. Mary's, the more I realized something wasn't right. A few months later, the rumors started to feel a little too real. One evening after school, I stayed late for basketball practice. Most of the students had gone home, and the halls were eerily quiet. As I packed up my things in the gym, I heard it. A faint noise, like children laughing and running. I figured it was just a group of kids messing around, but when I peeked into the hallway, it was empty, completely empty. The next day, I overheard some teachers talking. They were whispering about a strange incident involving one of the parents. Apparently, a mother had called the school, upset, saying she almost hit a girl running across the courtyard. She swerved just in time, but when she looked again, the girl was gone. A cold chill ran down my spine when I heard that. The courtyard was where I had heard the voices the night before. That week, everything seemed to escalate. The school began receiving more complaints from parents, more sightings of children playing in the courtyard after hours, or running down the halls when no one should have been there. One night, a janitor quit on the spot after seeing a girl skipping through the empty hallways only to vanish in front of his eyes. The school tried to play it off as nothing, but I knew something strange was happening. Emily said it was the patients, restless spirits who had died when the school was a hospital, still wandering through the place that had become their prison. I didn't believe her, at least I didn't want to. Then one day after class, I found out for myself. I stayed late again, helping my teacher organize supplies in the storage room. It was getting dark outside, and I was about to leave when I heard it again. Soft footsteps and the sound of children laughing. It came from the courtyard just beyond the window. I glanced outside, and my heart stopped. There, in the middle of the courtyard, was a little girl. She looked about 6 years old, wearing a school uniform that was off, like something from a different time. Her hair was disheveled, and she was skipping around in circles, completely alone. My first instinct was to go outside and ask if she was lost, but then she stopped. Slowly, she turned her head and our eyes met. Her face was pale, unnaturally pale, and her eyes were hollow, empty, like she was staring straight through me. She raised her hand and waved. I stumbled backward, my breath catching in my throat. When I looked back out the window, she was gone. I ran out of the classroom, my heart pounding, but the courtyard was empty, completely silent. That night, I told my parents about what I had seen, but they didn't believe me. They told me I was just imagining things, that I had stayed at school too late and let my imagination run wild. But I knew what I had seen, and I wasn't the only one. A few weeks later, the school was torn down for renovations, and I heard the rumors, the ones the teachers had tried to keep quiet. While tearing up the courtyard, construction workers found something buried beneath the stones. A single skeletal hand, clutching a rusted old school ID tag. The girl had been missing for over 60 years. Since then, the new school has been built, and everything seems normal. But I still pass by St. Mary's from time to time, and every time I do, I can't shake the feeling that she's still there, somewhere, waiting for someone to notice her again. Thanks for diving into the shadows with us. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more spine-chilling tales. Stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the truth is scarier than fiction. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.